Subscribe.
Hyrule Warriors is a Zelda fanfiction turned officially licensed Nintendo game. At least it feels that way. It all looks like Zelda and sounds like Zelda, but it doesn't play anything like the other Zelda games, and the story feels like some strange TV crossover episode. With all that in mind, Hyrule Warriors is a pretty fun time. I've never played a Dynasty Warriors game, but this hack and slash one-man army gameplay feels like it fits pretty well in this universe. I guess Zelda games talk of big wars and cataclysmic events, but most mainline games are set before or after those times, not during. Even though this is a separate story from those games, this is similar to what I had imagined some of those events looking like, and it's nice to see they were able to turn it into a playable and enjoyable experience. However, by the end of Hyrule Warriors, I had my fill of Warriors gameplay for the foreseeable future. To me, this game was mainly about the novelty. It was just so different that I knew I had to try it. I'm glad I did, but I never really got hooked into replaying or trying any of the other games. That's mainly because even though the gameplay is fun, you are doing pretty much the same thing every single encounter. Any attempt to spice things up fell pretty flat. Whether that was the bosses or the side objectives, they mostly required me to stop what I was doing and head somewhere to help someone or defeat some specific guy. I didn't need all that, really. All I wanted was more incentives to mow down armies. All those side things turned Hyrule Warriors from an action game to almost a management game. The amount of times I had to rush over to help an ally because they don't know how to swing a sword is uncountable. This stuff discouraged me from replaying it or trying any other modes because I didn't want to deal with that aspect of it anymore. The core idea and gameplay is fun, and it was awesome to see Zelda in such a different setting, but I just didn't want to deal with the other stuff more than once this time.
6 out of 10!
Kirby and the Rainbow Curse is kinda mid. Thanks for watching. Actually, while I have you here, I might as well explain what I mean. Kirby and the Rainbow Curse is not your typical Kirby game. As you can see by the gameplay, you're not running, jumping, or even sucking up enemies. Kirby just rolls around. It's an interesting idea. There aren't any other games like this besides the DS one as far as I know, so points for being unique, but there's a lot of things I don't really enjoy that surround this nice nugget of core gameplay. It makes use of the Wii U gamepad, but then I'm spending all my time looking at the gamepad. Spending hours looking exclusively at that little low-res screen isn't that entertaining. It's a shame because Rainbow Curse has a really cool art style. I just can't fully take it in on a 480p screen. There's some cool moments in there that take advantage of the way you have to draw Kirby's path, but I feel like the developers didn't know when to stop. I didn't exactly binge Rainbow Curse, but nevertheless, by the end I was so tired of it, I just wanted it to end. I got the whole drawing thing down after the first couple worlds, and they introduced some stuff from then on, but by the end it was largely just drawing the same lines, just getting gradually faster. And that's how it gradually became more stressful to play. Imagine writing an essay, but every paragraph you have to write a little faster than the last one, or else you have to start from the last sentence. It's an interesting torture method, not so fun as a video game. Now, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse never really got that bad. The difficulty was okay throughout the whole thing. It is a Kirby game after all. If it went any longer or got any more difficult, I wouldn't feel as positive about it, but as it is though, it's just okay.
6 out of 10!
Even though most LEGO games are the same formula, LEGO Batman 2 is my favorite version of it. It just feels like peak LEGO game design. It hits all the right beats for a LEGO game, and then it adds some extra awesome stuff because why not? Jumping right into the main campaign, you'll notice that something is different from the previous games. The characters are talking. Yep, LEGO Batman 2 was the first LEGO game to be fully voiced. While I generally don't like the games that came out after this change, I actually think the debut of voice acting in LEGO was pretty solid. I don't remember any voices being extra weird or the writing being all that bad. Solid job on this entry. The campaign itself's just more LEGO goodness. The same breaking bricks and solving puzzles as any other LEGO game, so if you like that, then you'll have no problems with this. In the last LEGO Batman outing, we got a lot of different suits to play with, and you get even more here. In fact, the roster in this game has got to be one of my favorites. It's in a nice sweet spot between the tiny rosters of the old games and the overwhelmingly huge rosters of the new ones. Right in the middle, getting most of the obvious picks from the DC universe and a couple of obscure ones for fans. My favorite part of LEGO Batman 2 is definitely the overworld. In other games, there was a nice little hub to get you from place to place and see the other characters, but in this game you get the whole city of Gotham to explore, and it's awesome. Not only that, but every corner of Gotham has something to do. There are puzzles all over the place, as well as races for the vehicles, but the best part has got to be the mini-bosses sprinkled all over the map. One of my favorite gaming memories was searching all the corners of Gotham to find all the villains lurking around. Then I'd bring them to justice and add them to my roster. Before I make this review too long, I'll just say that LEGO Batman 2 is just a pleasure to play. It's a wonderful celebration of one of my favorite pop culture brands. The only complaint I have is that sometimes levels can go on too long and gameplay gets too repetitive. This obviously can be translated to all LEGO games, and it's why I don't think any of them are exceptional, but out of the bunch, LEGO Batman 2 is definitely my favorite.
8 out of 10!
So I did not like LEGO Batman 3, like, at all. It's not that it was broken or frustrating, it was just not that fun. It is a LEGO game, so it has that. It's still beating bad guys and flying around and solving puzzles and all that, and it's okay. I'm not really complaining about that, I guess. It's just, well, where do I start? The story felt kind of all over the place. I like the idea of traveling around the DC universe. We got to see a lot of different planets and things, mostly from Green Lantern, which I love, but as a result of having us travel around so much, the story felt so disjointed and I lost connection with it. I can't remember exactly when, but there was a switch in my head that went from being mildly interested in the story to just going from level to level. Because honestly, it seemed like the devs cared more about fitting all the Lantern planets into the story than making a story actually flow. After that disconnect happened, I started to dread the gameplay. LEGO gameplay isn't all that bad, but it mostly is just breaking stuff until you find the answer. It's not something that can stand on its own, in my opinion. It needs to be supported by something else, like the brand or the story, which is probably why all these games use some kind of license. But even the last LEGO Batman game wasn't all that great just because of its story. It was more about the roster of characters in the open world and the completion process. Well, LEGO Batman 3 missed all of those marks. The roster felt really bloated. There were lots of lanterns, of course, which really padded out the list. There were also just some choices that felt like, okay, hey, we need this character because it's not a DC game without this character. It's also worth noting that most of these characters were just kind of there to be collected, and it made most of them feel more like costumes than actual characters. The hubs were terrible in this game. Rather than one big hub, we got a bunch of medium-sized ones, but they were all either too big and or empty. This made going for completion in these areas a chore. I did eventually complete LEGO Batman 3, but I kinda wish I didn't. It wasn't very fun, and the roster I got after doing it all was just really boring. I would not recommend LEGO Batman 3, unless you really like DC, I guess.
4 out of 10!
In the wake of the MCU, I feel like I have more knowledge on Marvel than DC at this point, but I still personally enjoy DC more. I went into LEGO Marvel Superheroes expecting to enjoy it. I had played it here and there at a friend's house and liked it there, so when I got it myself, I thought it would just be more of the same. For some reason in this setting, I didn't find it nearly as enjoyable. At this point in LEGO, I was more in it for the open sandbox than the main story, and LEGO Marvel's story I especially did not like. My MCU watching self was not prepared for all of the off-the-wall characters and interactions in this game. I'm sure it would have been super cool for someone who knows this stuff, but I was just so lost. There were some elements of MCU stuff in there, but it felt like a weird side story. Even though I didn't know the comic characters, I would have rather had them pick either that or the MCU style and just go with that rather than trying to play both sides. Like I said though, I was mostly in it for the sandbox aspect. I just wanted to get the characters and mess around in the open world. And that part of it was fun, but I was too far removed from this brand to really connect with it. All it really did was make me want to go back to LEGO Batman 2. For Marvel fans, I can understand that people may really like this game, but I barely got through it, to be honest. Like I said in the last review, when you don't have much of a connection to the license, these LEGO games break down pretty fast. Fun if you like Marvel, but definitely not for me.
5 out of 10.
The LEGO Movie video game shattered my love of LEGO games. This thing is so boring. So boring in fact that I forgot I had to finish this game multiple times until I finally did so. This game is much different than all the other LEGO games. It was the same general structure, hub, puzzle platforming gameplay, big roster, you get the image. But all this actually made me like the LEGO Movie game less. It made me realize that it wasn't the actual game that kept me playing all these LEGO titles. The only reason I played any of these was because it had a brand attached to it that I liked. That kind of upset me because I've generally become pretty jaded on that whole concept now. The whole idea that this thing you're spending your time playing or watching isn't actually that good, it just has a connection to something you like. It feels pandering and gross. This game is one of the games that showed me that ugly truth. The main brand attached to this game is just Lego. It felt like all the smoke and mirrors just disappeared, and all that was left was this really bare bones platformer. If there's no outside brand attached to this adventure, I'd rather not have the adventure. This is Lego we're talking about here. Make a game that's actually creative. But beyond this, the Lego Movie game also just has this licensed game stink on it. You know, when you play a game based on a movie and all the voices, cutscenes, and most of the music are just taken from the film, and where they couldn't fit the film, they just used voice doubles. At this point, I'd rather just watch the movie. At least I'd have a fun film to watch rather than this secondhand junk. The Lego Movie video game is still the same Lego formula that's been established for years at this point. If you like this structure, I guess there's a chance you'll like it. Personally, I found that if Lego is going to go this route, they need to lean into the brand they're representing. Otherwise, they need to be more outside of the box with their style. If it were really up to me though, I'd say do not buy this one. There are so many better games like this out there, it's not worth your time.
3 out of 10.
So I've played a lot of Mario Kart 8. It's a game that fits every situation. Feel like gaming but don't know what to play? Maybe a Grand Prix will fill my time. Got a few friends over, or hell, a whole damn party? People don't mind some Mario Kart 8 on the screen. Maybe you're on vacation and you and your family need a break from all the excitement. Boot up Mario Kart 8. After all this time playing this game, I think I've finally given out. It's a great game, but I am so tired of it. Mario Kart 8 is the most polished Mario Kart. Maybe one of the most refined games Nintendo has ever made. The driving feels incredibly natural. The tracks are pretty much impeccable. The music is top notch. The graphics are so nice. This game hit every note so perfectly that I feel like Nintendo is scared to make another sequel. It's probably why it's getting this half-assed DLC almost a decade into its existence, just to keep people playing. But Nintendo, I'm talking to you directly now. This well has run dry. Any further attempts to stretch out Mario Kart 8's lifespan just makes me like it less. Yes, it's incredibly well made and the critics will always sing their praise, but I'm so bored of it now. It doesn't feel interesting anymore. Where are the kinks? Where are those little quirks that make every race feel different? Anti-gravity was cool back in 2014, but it's old news now. Give us something wacky again. Mario Kart 8 has other problems beyond the passage of time. The roster sucks. I remember this complaint when the game came out, and I feel like we all just kinda forgot. This roster still sucks, even if it has King Boo in it now. The items have been pretty neutered. They don't mean as much as they did in previous games, and that makes me sad. After getting over the novelty of anti-gravity, I found it to be pretty underwhelming. It allows for some cool set pieces and layouts, but functionally it's the same as regular driving, and the idea of players boosting off each other didn't feel entirely thought out. I mean, if both players get a boost from hitting each other, what's the point? I'll still play Mario Kart 8 any day of the week. It's hard to complain about a game this fine-tuned, but I'm just feeling worn out on it right now. I'd rather go back to Wii or Double Dash at this point. As broken as those games were, at least they do something beyond looking pretty.
8 out of 10.
Hey, look, we're back at the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and yup, it looks exactly the same as the last one we looked at. Shocker. But somehow this one sold way less and has a much worse reputation. I wonder why. Well, if you remember my last review, I proposed a theory. The reception and sales of these new Super Mario Bros. Games weren't actually reflective of their quality. Rather, it was entirely about their relevance to the consumer. Let's continue with this theory. Despite what Nintendo may tell you, this game feels identical to the others. It looks the same, barring the new HD resolution. Even most of the soundtrack is exactly the same. So then why does this one get so much less attention? Well, there's a few reasons for that in my opinion, but the most obvious one is that it was on the Wii U. If you're watching this review, there's a good chance you had one of these consoles, but let's never forget how badly the Wii U actually sold. The Wii U sold about 13 million units. That's about a quarter of the Xbox One and about 12% of what the PS4 sold. To put it simply, in the larger gaming space, basically no one was playing this game. For comparison, New Super Mario Bros. On the Wii sold about 30 million copies. That's more than double the amount of Wii U consoles. I'd be hard pressed to find someone in the wild who knows what a Wii U is, let alone this game. The next biggest factor in this game's reception to me is the burnout we were experiencing at this point. For those that did buy this game, this was the fourth game in this Innovation-averse series, and the second one to come out in the same year. If I had New Super Mario Bros. 2 around this time, I'd be upset that they didn't even let me finish this game before releasing the next one. And just one more time to drive this point home, these games play almost exactly the same. Looking up critics' reviews of this game, they end up being pretty similar to previous games. but I think they missed the larger picture this time. For these journalists, reviewing video games is their job. I imagine they aren't so concerned with the sales of the Wii U in their reviews. That's something for another article. And in most cases, in the time it takes between releases, you'll have different people within the company reviewing each entry. They come to the conclusion that New Super Mario Bros. U is a fine game. And it is, but at that point it's hard to discern how repetitive the new Super Series is until the scores come out and they all look the same. Like them, if you look at any of these games in a vacuum, you'll find that they're just okay, maybe even good. But with a series like this, I feel like it's necessary to get the context of the rest of the series. New Super Mario Bros. U is fine, but if you've played any other New Super Mario Bros. Entry, there is no point in playing it. Just keep moving.
6 out of 10!
This is a celebration of Nintendo done right. Nintendo Land manages to be more than just a nostalgia machine for those unfortunate enough to buy the Wii U. It turns a bunch of its iconic franchises into really enjoyable minigames. Back when I first got the Wii U, this game came in the bundle, and it was all we had for a little while there. But that was okay. This was something my whole family could sit down and play. We had our favorites, of course. Most of the time we would play the Mario Tag, or Luigi's Ghost Hunt, or the Zelda Gauntlet game. After each play, we would fill up the plaza with statues or check out what the other Miis were saying. It was a fun time. Not only is Nintendo Land a fun party game, but it was also a great showcase for what the Wii U could do with its gamepad. Most of the games took advantage of this asymmetrical multiplayer. There were other things like the touchpad and gyro, but for us the opportunities provided by asymmetrical multiplayer were by far the most interesting. That's probably why we played the games we did for the most part. In the same vein, this is also probably what eventually stopped us from returning to Nintendo Land. A lot of the games we didn't find very interesting, and the ones we did ended up feeling pretty similar. As a result, we eventually got bored and moved on. In retrospect, Nintendo Land probably made the most use of the gamepad of any game I can think of. It made the best case for it in my opinion. While Nintendo Land itself didn't end up being enough to launch the Wii U into success, the game itself remains rather enjoyable. Nowadays, we have most of the big Wii U games on Switch, but Nintendo Land will probably be forever stuck on the Wii U, given how dedicated it is to its hardware. Shame too, since this is one of the better ones. It's also a shame that even though Nintendo Land did a good job showcasing the gamepad still didn't have that much to show. A lot of it we've already seen, touchpad, gyro, etc. And the asymmetrical multiplayer can only provide so much. Nintendo Land did the best with what it was given. It had a lot of charm and some fun minigames, but it can't really provide much beyond that. It's a fun time, but I wouldn't really go out of my way for it these days.
7 out of 10!
Pikmin 3 is so far the only Pikmin game I have played. I had known about Pikmin through friends and through Smash, but it never really seemed like my type of game. But back in 2013 when Pikmin 3 came out, well, I was a bit starved for good Wii U games, so I decided to take the plunge. What I found was a beautiful game unlike any other I've played. Categorizing Pikmin is hard. I guess it's most fitting to call it a strategy game, but it also has puzzle elements, adventure and survival aspects, even a bit of Metroidvania in there. It kind of broke down genre conventions for me, and that was incredibly refreshing. It was also brimming with charm. The coolest bit was how the alien planet you were on was pretty obviously a version of Earth, except everything around you is huge. That makes every bug a massive monster, every pot a piece of architecture. It's that familiarity crossed with the alien perspective that made mundane objects into interesting finds. It also made Pikmin 3 legitimately scary at points. I got pretty stressed out at points rushing to get all my Pikmin back to the ship before nightfall. There were a few instances where I had to leave a massive group of Pikmin behind because of a strategic mistake, and I watched in horror as the numbers fell. This part of the game was cool, but in retrospect, while I was playing it, it really did sour the experience. At the very least, it discouraged me from trying the other games in the series. This is why I don't really enjoy strategy games with time limits and huge consequences. I think it's a lot more fun to take my time soaking in this environment the developers have made. To be fair, Pikmin 3 isn't insanely strict. You get a good amount of time during the day to figure things out and lollygag, at least until the end. I had a good time with this game all the way up until the credits rolled. It's a well-crafted world with lovable characters and unique strategy puzzle-solving gameplay. It was great, but I haven't decided if I'll ever revisit it again.
8 out of 10!
Alright, so apparently everyone thinks Rayman Legends is one of the best platformers ever made. Well, I'm here to say, It's fine. I do like it more than Origins, I'll give it that, but I was still struggling to get all the way through this one, to be honest. To start off positive, Rayman Legends is very pretty, much like its predecessor. Could be the bump in resolution, but I think it's a tad better looking than Origins. The controls feel even more smooth, which is great. The levels are much more fun on average. There are a lot more ideas used, and it keeps the game feeling pretty fresh all the way through. I like the music a lot more too, and those musical levels are just wonderful. There's a lot of good content in Legends, but there are also some things I didn't like. So on the Wii U version, there are some instances where you have to control Murphy with the touchscreen. To be blunt, I hate these levels. They feel super gimmicky, and I dread having to play every single one I come across. Like I said before, Rayman Legends has some buttery smooth controls. I hate having to let go of my controls in order to play some tacked on touchscreen levels and beg my AI character to follow along. The other thing I don't like here is gaining progress with the teensies. This probably also explains why I didn't like Origins very much, since they have a similar progression thing going on. You have to collect a certain amount of teensies to progress, but they feel like they conflict with the rest of the design to me. Levels in Rayman Legends feel incredibly linear. They guide you along a straight path to the end and challenge you to overcome progressively harder obstacles along the way. This isn't a bad thing at all. My problems start to crop up when we add random secret passages that hold these teensies that are required to access the rest of the game. It's annoying when a level strongly points you in one direction, but then requires you to go against the flow in order to actually progress. There were many times where I beat a level, had a good time, and then I realized I didn't have enough of these guys to unlock the next, and so I had to replay and replay. I don't understand how that can be considered fun. It eventually changed how I have to play Legends as well. I want to just blast through these levels, but I can't. I have to keep my eyes constantly peeled for these MacGuffins if I want to keep playing. And the game acts like there's still bonus secrets, going ooh every time you find a door. They aren't fun little rewards for exploring if you're required to get a few every level to progress. Alright, I'm gonna cut this rant short. That whole teensy thing, along with the Murphy levels, are a big reason why I don't think Rayman Legends deserves as much praise as it gets. It's still a good game, maybe even a great one depending on who you ask, but by no means is it an outstanding platformer beyond its style.
7 out of 10!
Scribblenauts Unlimited is probably the Scribblenauts game to play if I had to pick one. It feels like the fully realized vision that was promised however many years ago when the original Scribblenauts released. The pool of items is massive, and now you get to create your own objects from scratch. This is an amazing tool that allows players to fill out the objects list with anything the developers forgot. I remember playing Unlimited back in the day, and it really felt like everything was accounted for. This had the knock-on effect of making the missions feel a lot more creative. Sure, you could solve a lot of the puzzles with a smaller pool of answers, but now that you have the ability, why not experiment with this bigger pool of objects? The other thing about Scribblenauts Unlimited is that the puzzles feel a lot more thought out. With a game like Scribblenauts, it's good to require the player to get specific with their answers rather than letting them fulfill general conditions. There are still a fair share of those missions in there, but a lot more of them require specific objects. This forces the player to think outside of the box and also expands their knowledge of the item list. At some point though, I did get a bit Google happy with this game. The other side of requiring more specific puzzles is that sometimes if you don't know the thing they want, you just don't know. There are plenty of instances where I looked up the answer and said, oh yeah, I would have never gotten that. It did unfortunately take some of the magic away. I also think that in general, these Scribblenauts games just aren't for me. Despite what you may think, I don't really consider myself much of a writer. I'd much rather draw something out, and so having to come up with a word for every image in my head is difficult. But hey, if this looks interesting to you, I would definitely encourage you to give it a shot. I'm not sure if the online features are still functional or not, but either way, Scribblenauts Unlimited will remain as a nice puzzle game for anyone who wants to pick it up.
7 out of 10!
Welcome to Shovel Knight, the indie darling retro revival platformer. Known by many as one of the best indie games out there. This one was a huge step for bringing indie games into the mainstream if I'm not mistaken. And what a good representative to have. Shovel Knight is definitely one of the better ones, and while I don't click with it as well as some other people, I cannot deny this is a quality title. Let's jump in with my favorite part of Shovel Knight. This game is just bursting at the seams with charm. From the enemies to the townsfolk, the bosses, to Shovel Knight himself. I admire how Shovel Knight doesn't feel the need to explain itself. It doesn't ever question the ridiculousness of a knight wielding a shovel as their main weapon. It just asks that if you want to play, you have to accept these things, and that does a great job in bringing me right in. It's not that Shovel Knight takes itself too seriously. It's not afraid to crack jokes or put the player in funny situations, but when it's time to pick up your shovel, all that goes away and it comes down to just you and the terrain in front of you, and a seriously rocking soundtrack. Shovel Knight is a very refined platforming experience. The controls are super responsive, and although you only have a few main moves, the levels always find a new way to challenge you, and Shovel Knight was always challenging me. It felt like as I was getting better, the game was just a step ahead, and it always pushed me to keep going. The sub-items provided a lot of control in terms of playstyle, to give Shovel Knight a new lease on life, to help with platforming challenges, to relieve some pressure during a boss fight. I loved all the levels, but the boss fights weren't really my forte. Most of my frustrating moments came down to the order of no quarter. I love the characters, don't get me wrong, but their fights were all over the place in my experience. Some of them I found really easy. I could pick up their patterns right away and be done with them in no time flat with a little patience. Others, I couldn't get by without spamming the phase locket. Some of them felt too hard to read. Others just had massive moves or environmental hazards that made it difficult to focus. That ending boss rush gave me a lot of trouble. After reaching the end though, I can definitely say Shovel Knight was a great time. There's too much goodness in this package to ignore, and while it isn't for everybody, I'm glad we have a game and a character like Shovel Knight around to show that 8-bit can still be fun.
8 out of 10!
Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is a bad game. Super awful, no good dumpster fire video game that should have never been created. Don't even know where to begin on what went wrong. Like, everything is bad. I guess I can respect Sega for wanting to take Sonic in a new direction. I don't have as much of a problem with Sonic and Company not being fast. Would I rather them be fast like they usually are? Absolutely, yes. But that's not what makes this game awful. No, no, no. I'm sure that even if they finish this game, Sonic Boom would not be received well just based on how different it is, but the fact of the matter is they didn't finish this game. Like, at all. Usually when a game comes out feeling unfinished, it's closer to feeling unrefined. Like if I said a game should have a few more months of development, it'd feel more complete. Sonic Boom would have needed at least another year. It feels like I'm playing a late alpha or early beta build. The performance is nauseating. Constant frame drops, outright stuttering on occasion. Although this never happened to me, I wouldn't be surprised if this game just froze on people. There are also a ton of other bugs like falling through objects, scripted events not working how they're supposed to, as well as a lot of rendering errors. The biggest area that feels unfinished to me is the environment. Both the levels and the hub worlds feel like they were implemented after a first draft. The levels themselves are so basic there is no thought involved in solving puzzles. Enemies are thrown at you mindlessly. Some other areas are just confusing to navigate. The hubs are even worse. They're so empty, but the worst part is that they look like they should have people in them. They just didn't have enough time to put characters in there. The truth is there really isn't a reason to talk about Sonic Boom anymore. This thing has been beaten to death. Only outdone by Sonic 06 because it had more years on the market. But I don't think it's a competition as to what's worse. Sega says they've learned their lesson from this game, but honestly, I feel that has yet to be seen. They've made better things since, yes, but if that's your metric, then the bar is truly in hell. What Sega really needs to learn is to finish their games before putting them up for sale. To be honest, I don't think they've learned that lesson yet. Regardless, you knew this already, but don't buy Sonic Boom. Just don't. Don't even as a joke. You'll find very quickly that you wasted your money.
2 out of 10!
Sonic Lost World kinda baffles me. Why does this game exist? This was hot off the heels of Generations, one of my favorite Sonic games ever. But this wasn't anything like Sonic Generations or any previous Sonic game. The main buzz was that Sonic now had a run button. It was weird to see Sonic have a run button, but I was more concerned about the other decisions. The boost button kind of was a run button for Sonic already. Sonic just had a higher base speed in those games. Sonic is just now slower, which okay, I guess I can get used to. Sonic doesn't have to be naturally fast for the game to feel fast. In my opinion, that comes mainly down to level design and mechanics. But even the level design was weird. I never understood the focus on rounded planetoids and spaghetti strings. It doesn't seem like Sega could justify it either, because when the game starts, we just show up at this planet where everything is like this, and that's that. It makes the whole setting feel out of place. But they didn't really use these cylinders that much either. I bet for most of these levels you could lay them out flat and functionally nothing would change. Another idea that didn't see its full potential was the parkour system. This was one thing keeping me hooked to buy Lost World. It's the only change to me that felt like a natural progression of Sonic gameplay. I really wish they implemented it another way though. The way it works is all automatic, and that leads to a lot of unintended deaths. I would have thought that parkour would make things smoother and faster to traverse, but oftentimes just normal jumping is way more efficient. That doesn't change that sometimes it'll just happen when it wants to and end up killing you though. The last point that felt all over the place was the difficulty. Going through Lost World was just as easy as any other Sonic game right up until the last world or so. When levels jumped up a cliff in difficulty. I had so many game overs at that point due to instant death traps or parkour mess-ups or stingy checkpoints. Lost World is well made, I guess. The levels are generic, but they aren't bad. It looks nice and runs well, the music is great, but at its core I feel like it just doesn't work. It's stiff and unresponsive and doesn't know what it wants to do with itself. I wish I could say this is just a Galaxy clone or a failed Sonic Adventure / Generations hybrid, but I don't know what it is, and I don't think Sega knew either.
5 out of 10.
Splatoon is a different kind of shooter. It's trademark Nintendo, isn't it? Of course, they weren't going to enter this genre the easy way. They had to find some kind of twist that would appeal to their main demographic, and I think they came away with a pretty decent shooter. The aspect of spraying turf is pretty cool. It forces you to account for more things than just shooting other players. In some modes it gets you points, or at the very least allows you to establish a base where you and your teammates can move around more freely. The weapons are more focused on this balance of terrain coverage versus precision aiming, and there's enough options and gear to allow lots of different kinds of players to find their niche, something I think every good multiplayer game does. Splatoon has also got to be the most stylish Nintendo game in recent memory. It went for a more punk atmosphere with its visuals, characters, and especially the soundtrack. At first I found it a little strange. As someone who's been waiting years for any new Jet Set Radio content, I was kinda saddened that this was the best I could get. Later on, I did warm up to it. It certainly takes shades from games like Jet Set Radio, but I came to understand that Nintendo took this style in its own direction, and it works pretty well. It didn't take long for me to drop off of Splatoon's multiplayer though. I liked the game's mechanics, but not enough for how much repetition there was in terms of the map rotation. Not gonna lie, it also got pretty overstimulating at points. Games of Splatoon can get really chaotic when there's items and paint flying everywhere. When terrain is changing every second, it was super hard for me to get my bearings. It didn't help that all I could do was play with randoms either. So naturally, I took more of a liking to the single player. It wasn't a remarkable adventure, but Splatoon's controls and gameplay mechanics were fun enough to keep me going through the whole thing. Levels were just long enough to explore an idea and let you zip back to the hub and try something else. All in all, Splatoon was a decent experience. There are definitely some problems I have that I hope got solved in later entries, but I like the gameplay enough that I got a decent amount of time out of it.
7 out of 10.
Star Fox Guard is a game. It exists. That's about the most remarkable thing I can say about it. It was bundled in with Star Fox Zero, probably as a consolation prize, and so that Nintendo can say they got one of their E3 demos out the door. I'm surprised it came in its own disc. You just play tower defense with some robots. Every level gets a little bit harder than the last. It really isn't even Star Fox related. More so, it just has a Star Fox skin on it, probably to make it fit better with Zero. You're probably not going to be surprised when I say I didn't finish this game. I really didn't feel the need to. It's fine, perfectly functional, and a little fun, but these games aren't for me. After a certain point, I get stressed out by the amount of stuff I have to manage and just put it down, and it's probably not worth getting stressed over Star Fox Guard, just so I can say I beat it for my arbitrary games list. I did play it at least, and that's all I felt I had to do. I tried it, and I can say it's a nice little bonus for people who bought Star Fox Zero, but that's about it.
5 out of 10.
Man, I wish Star Fox Zero was good. I was so ready for this game when it was coming out. Around that time, I was going through some old games and had a fantastic time playing Star Fox 64. I know Star Fox has had a rough time ever since. It seemed like Nintendo didn't know what to do with this franchise, and if they needed to return to 64 in order to get Star Fox back on its feet, I was a-okay with that. I was unsure what kind of game we were getting, actually. At points, I thought it was a full remake of 64. At others, I thought maybe it was a sequel set in the same star system. It looks like in the end we got something in between a remake and a full reboot. I was a little sad to see that we weren't really getting a new adventure. It was cool to see these levels all upgraded and switched up in terms of their design, but I would have liked to see a continuation of sorts. Star Fox isn't all about the story, not by a long shot, but something different would have been nice. Where Star Fox Zero really fell apart was its mechanics. I saw Miyamoto demo the controls for Zero back then, and I thought it was a cool idea. I thought, okay, maybe I'll give that a shot, but I think I'll use the traditional controls first. I was certain that these motion controls were optional. It wasn't until I had the game in my hands that reality set in. I'd be using these controls the whole time. What makes the controls in Star Fox Zero so bad is that they never let you get your bearings. I liked 64 because the aiming and the movement were directly connected to each other. Wherever I was moving is where my shots were gonna go, and that made it a lot easier to settle myself in the space. In Zero, you control your ship and the shots separately. And because of that, I am constantly disoriented. Constantly. There's no way to manage your ship's positioning and your aiming at the same time. Whenever I have to shoot something, I momentarily lose where I am in the space, and then I have to check my ship to readjust. But as soon as I move my ship, my aim is no longer on point, and it becomes this nauseating back and forth of aiming and flying. It doesn't help that your ship is also constantly moving. What I can say is that I did get through the game this way. It wasn't fun, but I did it. To be honest, the only thing that got me through was my knowledge of 64, because Zero takes a lot of cues from 64. But you know what remedied this situation for me? The co-op. In co-op, one player pilots the ship and the other aims and shoots. When that back and forth is split between two people, it makes this game way easier to enjoy. I was actually having a blast that way. Overall though, Star Fox Zero is really rough. I liked everything except the controls. But the controls are so vital to the experience that all I can say confidently about Zero is that it's fine if you can get used to it. Or play co-op, one or the other.
6 out of 10!
I can't deny that Mario 3D World is a good game, but I just don't feel like it was a good fit for the Wii U. It's made more apparent when you compare 3D World to its cousin on the 3DS. Mario 3D Land felt perfect on that console. It was split up into bite-sized levels and didn't have very complicated controls or premise. It was just get from A to B, and on the 3DS, that's all it needed to be. 3D World feels a bit lacking on the Wii U. It is expanded a bit, you've got 4-player co-op and bigger levels, but it's largely the same philosophy as 3D Land. The Wii U is capable of so much more than a 3D new Super game. They tried to tie everything around this new Cat Bell power-up too. The Cat Bell is good. I think it's a little too good. Being able to climb up walls, flagpoles, and attack and dive is a bit much. It's frankly the only power-up that feels worth using in this game. It's nice that the other power-ups are here for the sticklers that only want the fire flower, but if you're not using the Cat Bell, you're not really playing 3D World. I do complain, but 3D World is still a fun time. It's nice to have a 3D co-op adventure. Much better than having one player be a Luma, I'll give it that. The graphics are nice, and so is the soundtrack. The levels are more bland than a more ambitious 3D title, but they're still well made. Those Toad Tracker levels are a nice break from the pace as well. It's one of those games that can absolutely be a fun time to play, but I just wish it were more. It stings a little more that this was the only 3D Mario we got on the Wii U as well. I can't really knock 3D World as is. There's a few nitpicks I have, like the green star requirements, but what 3D World sets out to do, it does pretty well. It's a fun game, but I think Nintendo went the safe route with this one, and that's ultimately what let me down. Would have been great to get multiplayer and a full-fledged 3D adventure, but instead we got 3D Land 2. A good game to be sure, but you get the point.
7 out of 10!
Super Mario Maker is more of a tool than it is a game, said the critic. I can't help but think Nintendo wanted to take a quick jab at the fans out there by making this game. Now there's an official way to make your own Mario levels. Get it here. Regardless of whether you think Mario Maker is closer to a Mario game or Microsoft Excel, it's still a lot of fun. There is a lot to do here for fans of different shapes and sizes. You've got the level creator, of course, which is the most fleshed out part of the experience. You can mess with a ton of different mechanisms and chain reactions to make something crazy, or just keep it simple with the blocks and Goombas. The different themes you can choose from are a nice touch, allowing you to take advantage of the admittedly few gameplay differences between 2D entries. I made a few levels myself back in the day. I like to keep things pretty simple on my projects. I didn't want to dive deep into the mechanics of each theme or anything like that. I was more interested in making a level that had a story progression to it, starting with introducing an idea, then making it harder and harder until the player has one final challenge before the flagpole. Of course, I made my fair share of troll levels as well. I did try the other side of Mario Maker a bit as well. I wasn't super involved in the community or anything, but I would occasionally go online and try out some random levels I'd find on the front page. Most of it was full of auto levels where you just stood there and watched the game move Mario for you. Not the most engaging thing, but it was cool to see the engine at work. I would also watch Let's Plays online and try some levels from there as well. Leave a comment if you played Swim the Musical back when that was making the rounds. All in all, Super Mario Maker was a nice package. I gotta say, I didn't feel there was much going on from the developer side. Like, most of this game was held up by the community for the community, but the community made some good stuff.
8 out of 10!
The first Smash I got competitively interested in. Also the Smash I was most competitively interested in. Smash 4 is in a weird place right now. When it came out, it felt like a step in the right direction after Brawl, but still more similar to it than Melee. Nowadays, it feels like Smash 4 was a step to what is now Ultimate. In a series where every game is pretty different from the last, Smash for Wii U strangely doesn't stand out. It's caught right in between. Before I get into that, I want to discuss Smash 4 on its own for a moment. When you play a game competitively, you start to develop a different mindset towards it. A lot of the problems I had with the game mechanically didn't feel as valid back then because if I wanted to go to tournaments, I had to deal with them no matter what. Now though, I can talk about some stuff that wasn't so fun to deal with. For one, the fighting style around Smash 4 was incredibly baity. Most combos were just a few hits into kill percent and then you had to fish super hard for a kill. Some characters were different, but on a large scale it was all about fishing for your character's best option. There weren't a lot of rounded kits to implement. For me and my crew, we kinda had this mutual agreement that we would be more aggressive and approaching in our matches. We typically found it more entertaining, but of course this wasn't the winning strategy, so anyone who came along and played more defensively had their way with us. Personally, it got on my nerves, but it wasn't all bad. I still very much love this game overall. Smash is a special kind of game that you can enjoy in a myriad of different ways and all different levels. I didn't often play with items, but they were a good way to level the playing field, as well as the stages with crazy gimmicks. The roster was great as well. I feel like we're spoiled a bit by Ultimate now, but I remember when Smash 4's roster felt big. The new characters were hit and miss with me. I liked their inclusion as characters, but for most of them, I didn't click with their playstyles. From a casual perspective, the main thing that was lacking was some good single-player content. I was very sad to see that Subspace didn't return. I heard that it was mainly because the devs didn't like having the story spoiled on YouTube or something, but that is a super lame reason to exclude one of the best modes in Smash history. Without it, most other single-player modes are just variations on regular Smash battles. In that case, I'd much rather just play multiplayer or set up a computer match with rules I actually want. Smash 4 is this strange middle step between Brawl and Ultimate right now, but I don't think it's entirely fair to write this one off. Smash 4 still has its own gimmicks that make it its own, and going back to it still can be fun. I definitely have come back to it from time to time, and there are aspects to it I like more than Ultimate or Melee. It's just a shame that this one has been pushed aside.
8 out of 10!
It just feels like every time I boot up this game, it's gearing me up for an adventure on the high seas. Some people don't seem to like all the sailing in Wind Waker, but I rather like it. For me, there's two main modes at play here. There's the generally more action-packed, dungeon-crawling, monster-slaying gameplay, and then there's the more serene, relaxing, almost therapeutic sailing between spots. I really like this dynamic in Wind Waker. When you're on land, it feels more like a traditional Zelda adventure, solving puzzles, talking to townsfolk, slaying foes, and it's all pretty much just as good as it was in Ocarina of Time. I also like the new parry attack, where if you're keen, you can do critical damage to a foe or just wipe them out completely. It's a nice addition. The sailing side of things is fun too. I actually don't mind how spread out things are. You get a moment of respite from everything, and it also gives you some time to plan your next move. I didn't really explore them very often, but you can also find little islands with side quests or smaller treasures along the way, which is a nice touch. The most obvious thing you can say about Wind Waker is that it looks different. And yeah, it does. If you mean it looks gorgeous. At least on the HD version, everything is so vibrant and the new art style is great for character expression. It makes Link feel more than a blank slate this time. I also really like Tetra. Her attitude creates a great dynamic with this new, more naive Link. The story is pretty much the same Zelda fare, and I think that was intentional. It's less about the overall plot and more about the character-to-character moments in this world. From a gameplay standpoint, Wind Waker is pretty solid. No real issues with the combat controls or anything like that. I will say that the progression hit a few snags towards the end. It was doing such a great job at providing a smooth adventure until about after you get the Master Sword. You have to go on this whole hunt to power it up and maybe do some other stuff before you actually get to fight Ganon. It felt like padding game time and wasn't that fun. That's really the only complaint I have with Wind Waker, to be completely honest. I just love everything else in it. Graphics, gameplay, setting, music, all that stuff was pretty great the whole time. Just that ending bit needed some work. I feel like most players can deal with it with a guide at the very least, so if you want to give Wind Waker a try, I would highly recommend it, specifically the HD version if you can get your hands on it.
9 out of 10!
Wow, this game is bad. Can I even call it a game? I guess if I played it with a controller, I gotta call it a game. Not that it deserves it though. So a little background into why I even have this piece of trash. It was around Halloween and my friends were planning to get together to hang out and do Halloween stuff. The year before we had a really cool party where we sat around a computer and played some horror games. Lots of fun. So this year I wanted to do that again. I figured getting a horror game that'll jump scare your friends isn't that hard. There are tons of cheap and even free horror games online that do the job. Because I was addicted to my Wii U, I went on the eShop and looked up the cheapest horror games I could get. This game looked perfect. It was that cheap, cheesy indie horror vibe I was wanting. So I got it. And I was sorely disappointed. And that's saying something, because when you're already in the market for a game like this, the bar for quality is underneath the floorboards. But the letter couldn't even get over that. This game advertises itself as a horror game, but it's definitely not scary. It's just dark. That's it, seriously. This game is just dimly lit. No jump scares, no gore beyond a couple of JPEGs of blood on the ground, not even some royalty-free scary music. I'm pretty sure it was just silent the whole time. You go around collecting these letters, which have some kind of plot relevance if you care about that at this point, and eventually the game just ends. What a waste of money.
1 out of 10.